Welcome back to the Philly Film Room podcast. Along with Eric Sidewater, I'm Nick Waters, and today we have an episode that we have been waiting quite a long time to bring to you guys. I first of all want to apologize, number one, to Eric because he took the time out to research, record, and finish the first podcast with me, but I had some technical errors on my end, so we weren't able to put that out. Also want to apologize to the fans because we went through all the position previews and we skipped the offensive line and quarterback previews due to errors on my end. So I want to apologize to everyone for that, but I don't want to skip past the quarterback preview because that's the number one most important position in football, and we have a leading man at the helm. So let's jump into the show. Looking at Jalen Hurts and his 2023 year, I think most people would call it a down year by Jalen Hurts standards. But at the end of the day, he was still voted the 15th best player in the NFL by his peers. He was tied for second in total touchdowns. He was seventh in total yards, and that's despite being injured for much of the year, where he wasn't able to use his legs to his full extent and his full capabilities. And while he was third highest in interceptions, he was tied for eighth best in turnover-worthy throw percentage. So I expect some positive regression going into next year. And then you add to that, the scheme should be improved. If you look at pretty much any starting quarterback that has played in a Kellen Moore system, they have put up very good numbers. But looking at Jalen Hurts and really his strengths and what he was good at and what stood out to me last year, I really thought his pre-snap diagnosis was really good. He could really notice alignments and disguises of defense. He would notice the alignments of your linebackers and safeties to see if they were lined up in a certain way to kind of disguise what the defense was trying to do. He would use hard counts to get those guys to shift. And just based on those movements, based on leverage of safeties and corners, their depth, how far off they were, their eyes, and who they were looking at pre-snap, he did a really good job of being able to diagnose what defenses were doing pre-snap and get the offense into looks that the offense had designed and game plan for. So I thought he was really good with that. It's very Peyton Manning-like. He was a guy that didn't like a ton of pre-snap motion because he liked to see a picture of the defense and see, all right, they came out in this, aligned to this formation last time we came out and ran this play. How are they aligned now? What's different? Can I pick up any clues? And Jalen was really good with that. A specific play I did want to highlight here is there's a play against the Bucks where he throws a skinny post to Devontae Smith. It felt like it must have been 50 plus air yards on a rope as well. But something that you kind of notice, that play was something that Jalen and the coaching staff had seen and set up throughout the game. The Buccaneers safety started in cover one at the beginning of the game, 15 yards off pre-snap. The Eagles came out and ran the ball another couple times. That safety started creeping up to about 12 to 13 yards off the ball. Then the Eagles came out with a play action. That safety ends up creeping up about 12 yards off the line of scrimmage. Jalen sees the leverage and that the safety's not deep enough, and he takes a shot to throw a skinny post to Devontae over top. And he ends up, when you pause and see where Devontae caught the ball, it was about 2 yards of separation between the safety and where Devontae caught the ball at. So noticing little things like your depth, your leverage, things like that, Jalen Hurts is really good at and allows him to create big plays and get the offense into advantageous situations. On top of that, I think he has good accuracy, whether that's throwing deep down the field or just throwing layered and touch passes over the middle. He does a good job throwing to receivers leverage, and his ability to throw on the run and even adjust when there's a man in his face is very good. And it makes him one of the best playmakers in the NFL, one of the hardest guys to stop, because even when you think you have him contained, he can break out of situations, throw on the run, and make plays when the offense really was in a bad play. He's able to make the offense right when they're wrong. So I think that's something else he brings to the table. And especially when you look at the play calling from last year, I think the play calling gets a little too much of the blame, but it wasn't the greatest play calling in the world, and I think Jalen really helped him out in a lot of aspects there. Other things that I really like about him is his play strength. He does a lot of things that most quarterbacks can't. Like if you think back to the 2-point conversion in the Super Bowl, that's not a play that someone like Joe Burrow makes. That's just only a few of the quarterbacks in the NFL can do that, and Jalen Hurts gives you that. His rushing ability gives the offense a numbers advantage in the run game, especially when you're using his legs and the threat of his legs and read option on quarterback designed runs. It allows you to have more blockers than they have defenders at that point in time. And last thing with Jalen is just he's always ready for the big moments. He doesn't look like the moments too big for him, and that really is exemplified in his performance in the Super Bowl. So, you know, thinking back to some of the rough patches from last year, looking at what the team has brought in to correct some of those issues, I think we're really looking for a bounce back for Jalen Hurts. And considering a down year for him was 15th best player in the NFL, I wouldn't be surprised if he's right back there and they're voted top 10 again going into next year. But kind of hogged a lot of the time there, Eric. What do you think about Jalen Hurts in 2023?
Yeah, before I kind of talk about what I view as his strengths and weaknesses, I wanted to touch on what he was being asked to do, or at least our best guess without being directly, in the coaching room. Um, they definitely were an offense that was based off getting their playmakers the ball, especially in favorable matchups. So as opposed to having a bunch of window dressing, like you mentioned, with motions and formation shifts, um, like complex route combinations, etc., there was less of that, and it was more like, okay, Emmanuel Forbes can't cover AJ. Let's see how we can get him isolated and win that. That's just one small example, but that extends to everyone in the offense. That kind of was very highlighted against pressure. A lot of was made about how much they struggled against these 6 and 7 man pressures for good reason. It completely melted the offense. But their game plan against pressure, if you go back to 2022, was very similar, just with much better results. So there's a little bit of Monday morning quarterbacking saying, oh, it was a terrible plan for pressure because it didn't work. Now, the trick is they were a little bit one-dimensional. A lot of these slot fades against cover zero looks, which eventually stopped working once teams made adjustments, or they actually just expected that to come and could get in the better position to play that. Ultimately, once they were down AJ in the playoffs, they were resorting to like little stick routes from Goddard, which even if they worked, was getting like 3 yards. We touched on this previously. They just need to diversify their game plan against pressure. We thought that would be a topic of conversation when Kellen Moore was interviewed, and I'm sure he passed that with flying colors. If you look back at his tape, going all the way back to his early Cowboys days, they do all kinds of things to defeat pressure. Just to name a few, getting it just quick out to a back in space where they can beat a guy one-on-one, hitting CeeDee Lamb on slants, getting it to their big tight ends on little sight adjusts where if the guy who is over their face blitzes, they just turn around. Peak rule is another term they use, and you just hit them on like 2 to 3 yard route, but they catch it in stride. As well as max protect. You can pick up 7-man pressures. There's teams that do it. It's hard to say consistently, but it's an option, and I'd like to see them explore that, especially if they're going to run 12 personnel this year. You got a couple tight ends and a back. You can pick up almost every pressure. Now, it's a little bit easier said than done, especially now that you're going to have a rookie protection caller with Hurts taking that role. And now there was reports he reached out to Wink, who had some successful blitz plans against him, just to figure out like how are you constructing a blitz, where are the weaknesses and attacking it. So he's clearly proactive in trying to improve on some of the things that were his Achilles heel last year. I definitely do give a lot of the blame to the coaches in that department. But getting more into what Hurts was asked to do, a lot was talked about how he won't throw over the middle, and then eventually the narrative became the Eagles' offense wasn't structured to throw over the middle. Me and you have independently kind of myth busted that. They had, not a particularly low volume of routes developing over the middle such that the stats would reflect Hurts not throwing over the middle. It was there. There was times where it was open. Even you could see on tape, Hurts sees the guy and chooses not to throw it. We may have mentioned this previously, but Brock Purdy added the most value to his offense. If you're looking at kind of the advanced metrics, throwing over intermediate middle, he also had 6 interceptions on those throws. Hurts had 0 interceptions throwing over the intermediate middle, which at face value, it sounds really good. But then you're like, oh, but now he was like 20th in the amount of value he added to the offense. Because, yeah, he was risk averse, but it was to a fault where they weren't able to actually like move the offense at times, and they got stuck. This goes back to when he was at Oklahoma, when he was at Alabama, multiple offensive coordinators in the NFL. It's not fair to blame this on schemes, coaches, anything, or receivers, anything like this. I think it's a combination of him being risk averse, him being on the shorter side. Those are 2 of the main culprits of probably making him throw over the middle less than other comparably skilled quarterbacks. I would like to see him do it more. You can just, especially if you're getting AJ in the slot, those throws over the middle, it just develops so quickly. As opposed to AJ on the outside, I think 80% last year, but he's running a dig route and it's developing 12 to 15 yards down the field. For that to cross in, between the hashes, that takes some time. And one of the main issues with the Eagles offense last year was too many long developing routes all together. Not in if you're sending 5 guys out in a route, ideally you'd have 1 or 2 of those either be a hot route or something that develops much more quickly. So that we know for a fact that will be the case with Kellen Moore's offense because his entire career he has liked the quick game. Read option and RPO. It was noticeable to every Eagles fan that Hurts had less juice on the run game. I thought when he was moving in a straight line, he was 90% of what he was. It was really on these cuts. In 2022, he had unbelievable jukes at the line where he'd stop on a dime and cut back. Stuff you almost never see from quarterbacks not named Lamar Jackson. He didn't have that at all last year. It's probably a combination of the injury and them just paying him a couple $100 million and saying, we don't want you to take extra hits. The legs are back. It's just very obvious watching him in camp and everything. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to run him like crazy because, of course, he's still this tremendously valuable asset that you don't want to get injured. But I think people maybe underestimate the extent that RPOs can affect the defense. It's not just the play you run the RPO. It's the threat of the RPO forces you to have a whole nother responsibility that you typically wouldn't have if you're going against a non-RPO team. So now on any given snap, it's what's my run fit? What are my coverage rules? If it's pattern matching, what are all the possible things I could be doing based off what the guys end up running route-wise? And RPO, now you have a whole different set of rules where if you're like a nickel or safety, now that's putting a lot of second guessing into what you're trying to do. And ultimately, the way it materializes is you just don't play as fast because you're trying to process exactly what you're trying to do. The other thing I'd mention, no under center. They ran the lowest percentage of under center in the NFL. Hurts wasn't asked to set the protection. That was all on Kelsey, and very little motion. That will all change this year. They'll run. Now it remains to be seen if they'll tend to rely more on under center or pistol. Pistol has its advantages because you can get the quarterback in the run game. Definitely a little bit more dynamic in that sense. And then Hurts will be asked that call the protections. He said he's looking forward to that challenge, and he pretty much said that it stunted his learning because it was put completely on this other player. But I trust that he will embrace that and do a good job. Kellen Moore is always using motion with a purpose. Most notably, snapping the ball while a guy is still in motion. There's only 3 or 4 ways that teams typically respond to that, as opposed to you could have probably 50 different ways of pattern matching. So ultimately, I think motion does simplify the defense. And well, I don't know how that will affect Hurts. You mentioned it that he was really good at reading stuff pre-snap, um, and maybe that gives him a little bit of a fuzzier picture with motion and how teams are responding to that. It remains to be seen.
And then to Eli's question, yeah, it definitely helps, but then sometimes it can also hurt with some of the fast motions that we have with trying to see what the defense is doing, and then you send a quick motion and you snap it, and it's a totally different look.
So I'm interested in that. Last thing I'll mention, you turnover worthy throws. So just to put some numbers to that, Hurts had 15 turnover worthy throws. Now this is charted by PFF. I went through and I think it's pretty fair. Maybe you could say one or two the other way and you'd have a discrepancy. That's fine, but it's roughly fair. And he had 15 interceptions, so pretty much 100%. And then CJ Stroud, on the other hand, who everyone said is insanely safe with the ball, he had more turnover worthy throws. And those were definitely, I checked up on all of them. I mean, he threw it into harm's way pretty often, but he only had 5 interceptions. So that just goes to show you how volatile it could be. This is why the guys play defense and not receiver. A lot of the defenders can't catch. So Hurts had a lot of interceptions where the ball just popped up and it's much easier to catch. Now, there was like 3 plays where the safeties came over, like their Kyle Hamilton, and made amazing catches on the sideline. That's likely to regress to the mean. I'll go on record saying I don't think Hurts will have 15 interceptions. I think he'll be under that for sure, maybe in the single digits. So yeah, before I get into his strengths, just wanted to see if you had any thoughts on some of the things I mentioned.
Well, we could talk about throwing over the middle. I do think they're going to throw over the middle more. We kind of touched on this in the receiver video in terms of how much throwing over the middle is going to happen with Kellen Moore in this offense and where they're going to throw over the middle in particular, how far down the field. But I think we should talk a little bit about the throwing over the middle of the field because you touched on a hot topic, something that's become very much en vogue to say that the Eagles never ran any routes over the middle of the field. They weren't designing their offense to run over the middle of the field. It's just not true. And here's the thing. Certain players have certain play styles. They have certain preferences. Some players prefer to throw to the outside, or they prefer to throw to the middle, or they prefer to their one read quarterbacks and then they scramble. Everyone has different playing styles. And I think part of Jalen's playing styles, he'd rather throw outside. When you look at Jalen Hurts throwing his percentages of passes that were thrown over the middle throughout his career, and then compare it to every other quarterback that's been in a Nick Sirianni offense, you'll start to see that part of this is Jalen as well, just not wanting to throw over the middle. So Jalen, 2021, 37% of his passes were thrown over the middle. 2022, 44% of his passes were thrown over the middle. That's a career high. 2023, 38% of his passes were thrown over the middle. So career high, 44%. All of the other quarterbacks that have played in the Nick Sirianni offense. Gardner Minshew, he had 4 starts, 123 passes. So a small sample size, but it's a sample size nonetheless. 48% of his passes were thrown over the middle. Andrew Luck in 2018, 57% of his passes were thrown over the middle. Jacoby Brissett in 2019, 48% of his passes were thrown over the middle. Phillip Rivers in 2020, 55% of his passes were thrown over the middle. So to me, part of it is a Jalen Hurts style. He had the lowest percentage of passes thrown over the middle in any Nick Sirianni offense. And when you go back and look at the Nick Sirianni offenses that were run with the Colts and you run with the Eagles, there is a lot of carryover. He didn't just scrap everything he learned and then implement a new offense as soon as he came to the Eagles. He just adjusted things that they did. They obviously started going to shotgun more often. They just adjusted some of the things. But at the end of the day, Jalen's rate of throwing over the middle is low in nature. Then you look at Jalen in 2020. He had 4 starts, 124 passes. This was in the Doug Peterson offense. It was his rookie year compared to Carson Wentz. Jalen Hurts, 27% of his passes were over the middle. Carson Wentz, 49% of the passes were over the middle. So I think he's just as a guy that, for a number of reasons, doesn't throw over the middle as much. Now, we could talk about some of those. And these are going to be some of the areas for improvement that I'm looking for Hurts. And this is number one is pocket presence. I think he does have a habit of, if his first or second read isn't open, he does start to drop his eyes. He does start to look at the line, see where his escape routes are. I would like to see better posture and a better throwing platform as he's moving up and around in the pocket. When you look at guys like Josh Allen and you look at Pat Mahomes and you look at the best quarterbacks in the league, they consistently stay on platform as they're moving around the pocket so that they can be ready to throw and get to the reset and get to the next part of the progression on time. And when Jalen Hurts starts to get his shoulders square and towards the line of scrimmage, he's not in a position where he can really throw, or at least throw with much accuracy and much power. You have to then reset your body so that you can aim and point and fire at the receiver. But a lot of times he's ending up with his shoulder square at the line of scrimmage. So he misses plays and doesn't play on time. And because of that, there are plays where the route is designed to go over the middle of the field, but he will start to drift or he'll start to move and he won't be on platform and ready to throw. And then the throw ends up outside of the numbers. And then that's counted as a pass outside of the numbers. And now we're saying, oh, look, the Eagles don't target in the middle of the field. So there's plays like that. And I'm highlighting some of these plays. These plays happen in pretty much almost every game. You add to it, their offense was designed. You have AJ and Devontae, who are great deep threats, who are great boundary receivers. Some of those routes are just going to be, you are going to be targeting those guys a little bit more on the outside at times. I do think this year we should be targeting them a little bit more over the middle. Now, just talking a little bit more about Jalen and where we expect the passes to be over the middle of the field. When you look at the 49ers offense, I think a lot of us want the Eagles to be like the 49ers offense with how much they throw over the middle of the field. They tend to have a higher percentage be higher in the league average on the higher end of throwing to the intermediate part of the field. So from 10 to 19 yards in between the numbers. Whereas Kellen Moore's offenses have been much closer to, they have thrown a lot more in the short area over the middle of the field. So 0 to 9 yards. And it's a lot of slants, it's a lot of hitches, stick routes, sit routes, over the ball routes, things like that. You're going to see from the Kellen Moore offense. And with that, you're going to see Jalen bring down some of his time to throw because he had a very high time to throw last year, over 3 seconds. We'd like to see that get down below his 2022 numbers, which were pretty high at 2.8 seconds. So I think we'll see his time to throw drop a little bit, but we're going to see him get the ball out quicker, on time, with giving his guys like AJ and Devontae more opportunity for yak. And we'll start to see some of those, his rates of throwing over the middle go up again. And I wouldn't expect him to jump up to, Andrew Luck, 57% of his passes are going to go over the middle. I think somewhere between 47 to 50% of his passes will be over the middle. And we talked a little bit more about that in the receiver preview we did. So I've touched a lot on these numbers so far. So if you want to hear even more about that, I would jump and re-watch that video. So, but having said that, Eric, what are your thoughts on, you said you were going to mention some of Jalen's strengths?
Yeah. So I think the ball placement, it was phenomenal for the most part. So many tight window throws, but not like trying to fit it in between 3 different defenders. A lot of ones with a little bit of loft where they just drop into the breadbasket at various depths. He throws such a tight spiral, and that really helps on those types of throws, in my opinion. It's just the way the ball cuts through the air, and it's easier to track for the receiver. Running north and south, I thought he actually still was very effective. Picked up a lot of big third downs. One of the things maybe that's discounted about the Eagles offense last year, I think they were like the best third down team in the whole league. And a good portion of that is either Hurts running and picking it up, or you have to keep another defender to watch Hurts to make sure he doesn't pick it up. Because a lot of teams like to run man coverage on 3rd and medium, 3rd and long. But one of the big pitfalls of man is it's very susceptible to quarterback runs. So they might have to keep an extra guy in there as like a spy. Okay, well now that opens up the pass game. The other thing I liked, and this that he was really effective at fakes. Now, as opposed to someone like Patrick Mahomes or Matt Stafford, who's kind of ad-libbing during the play and just making stuff out of thin air and using their eyes and pump fakes to create openings. I don't think Hurts is that style of fakes. His is more like, oh, we know we're going to try to run a fake screen wheel, and he's just really good at selling the pump. And I saw it repeatedly on film where he could get corners and safeties to bite down because he's really good at selling the pump and then hitting the guy over top. I would lean into that. Some quarterbacks, they're just so nonchalant about when they're going through fakes. And this could extend even to run fakes. Now, they didn't run under center, so you lose a lot of that. I mean, the only thing you really have out of shotgun is the RPO, which sometimes it's actually just a play action. Sometimes it's actually just a run, but they just make it all look the same. To me, it's harder to deceive the defense like that. If you just go and watch any of these under center play action teams, and we'll see it week 1, the Packers love to run deep developing play action concepts from under center. And, if the quarterback doesn't sell the fake at all, the linebackers, they're not going to come up much. But if you have a quarterback who's really good at selling this, and I think the gold standard for this is Peyton Manning.
The fake is the reason the route's going to get open.
I mean, he was just unbelievable at these fakes. That the linebackers are completely thrown off, and they have no idea if you're running or passing. So I expect to see more under center concepts, and so maybe Hurts can show that he has some juice faking from under center. Did you want to touch on any of that before we get into weaknesses?
Yeah, so I'll touch on interesting point about the fakes and under center. First of all, I don't think they're going to be under center. Like, I still think they're going to be a bottom 10 team in terms of under center rate. The reason being, you lose that man advantage that you gain in the run game if your quarterback's able to run, just because of the read option and what you're able to do there. So because of that, scrambling quarterbacks or quarterbacks that are mobile and can use their legs in the run game, they generally tend to be high in shotgun rate. But under center, I do think they're going to be more diverse because pretty much last year, even when you take out the touch pushes, it was almost all run plays. They're going to be running more fakes, more play action, more diverse game from under center. And with that comes your play action fakes. And the fact is, Jalen Hurts hasn't done that a lot in his career. So is he going to be good at running fakes? There's an art to being good at executing these fakes. Part of it is your ball handling. Part of it is your effort after handing the ball off in terms of sprinting out of your fake and your rollout so that you can hold the backside defensive end. There's a bunch of different things that go into really selling the fake. So that's something that we'll need to pay attention to this season. Add to that, you touched on Jalen being good throwing, to receivers leverage. I thought he's really, really good at that, throwing with anticipation. And really putting it in a place where only the receiver can get it. That's why his turnover-worthy throw percentage is low, because he's good at putting it in spots. But what I think is great about that is they got Jahan Dotson. I don't think Jahan Dotson's a great necessarily underneath receiver where he's going to take a slant and run through tackles and take it to the house. But he's a really good route runner, and he's going to excel with a quarterback that knows how to throw to the receiver's leverage, knows where to place the ball based on where the safety is located over top. Jahan Dotson should excel more with the Eagles than he did playing with Sam Howell in the Commanders and with Carson Wentz the year before. So I think that is something to add as well. Now, looking at quarterback runs are still going to be part of this game, the game plan. They're still going to run read options, but they're going to be a little bit more diverse with their run game. They're going to run typical read options, but they'll run this play called a freeze option, where it looks like a read option, and you're really trying to sell the run and suck the linebackers up into their gaps. And then you run a speed option back the opposite way, and you really have a numbers advantage at that point in time. It's a really fun play to watch. Now, again, this isn't a base run. It's more of a change up run, but it's something that the Eagles are going to run. They'll run a play called quarterback zone lock where you fake a read option, but the running back is really just going to turn into a lead blocker for the quarterback, and they'll run it that way. They've run power read plays in the past where they jet sweep and they run a power read where that's a power play where you have a pulling guard, but you're reading the front side defensive end to see if am I handing this off on the jet sweep to go lateral and try and hit outside, or am I keeping this as the quarterback following the offensive lineman up the middle? So it's going to be a little bit more diverse of a quarterback run game. They're still going to run quarterback draws. I know people hated seeing it, but it's just going to be more window dressing. It's not going to be so obvious, I believe, this year, and what they're going to be doing. So
You just put a picture into my head, and it was like Goddard in line on the right side with AJ on the right side outside and Barkley. And then you have Dickerson pulling, and it's just a QB kind of power. I mean, the amount of beef out there just clearing a lane for him, that could be absurd. So, yeah.
yeah, and the Eagles, we unfortunately we didn't get the offensive line podcast out. But going into the season, Brandon Thornhow did his almanac on the offensive line, and he put in there who were the heaviest units, ranked first through 32nd, and the Eagles were second going into the NFL, and that's with Steen as a starter. They were projected to be first if Becton was a starter, so they're going to have the heaviest line in the NFL when healthy this year. So they should be moving people on the ground.
I actually looked into this a bit. From what I could tell, and if any commenters have better information, write it. I think this is the heaviest line in the NFL history, and it's the second tallest line in NFL history to the 2021 Patriots. I'm sorry, I had it wrong. It's the tallest line in history, and it's the second heaviest to the 2021 Patriots. So yeah, it's gonna be road grader season. So I'm looking forward to it.
Well, I think we can jump into weaknesses. What did you want to get to in terms of Jalen's areas of improvement that you're looking for this year?
Yeah, but I think this should always be said, especially when you're talking about really good players. Just because we're gonna name like a number of things that we think could be improved, that does not mean we don't think he's a fantastic player. We're both on the record saying that we're thrilled that Hurts is the quarterback, and some of the things we mentioned earlier in this podcast is why. So I thought some of the things like decision making, specifically overly risky throws, aggressive throws when they were leading. One of the ones that stands out, but there was several, was like the interception against the Seahawks in the second half when they were leading. I think it was like a third down. He just threw it up for grabs. And then the game-winning play when they got that touchdown to AJ Brown, but they could have just ran out the clock, and that was like they were pretty, and they still won the game, but like they kind of made it less certain than had they just ran out the clock. It's just things that you could just be more, prudent about trying to manage the game, especially when you're leading. Like, listen, I'm never going to tell someone don't be aggressive. You cannot win in the NFL if you don't have some level of aggression. And that extends to the defensive side. We've seen teams who they go up 2 scores, they start going into some prevent style D, and they just let the other team right back in the game. So that's not my suggestion, but just being more cognizant of game situation, flow of the game. And then they came out on record and said, sometimes we were just freelancing, saying, screw it. We're better than these other guys. We're going to make a play. Maybe they went to the well too many times on that. Working through progressions. Now, you listen to like casual football circles, they'll say can't read a defense or stuff like this. This is something that's levied on Lamar Jackson completely erroneously. But it is true that he really likes his first read, and the stats bear it out that when he got off his first read, his performance dropped off precipitously. Now, there's a lot of variables here, play design being a chief variable, because you need your second and especially like your backside reads, sometimes coming from the opposite side of the field, has to develop at the appropriate time so that you can get to it if you don't like what you see initially. But yeah, I think one of the other culprits of not working through his progressions is sometimes the third or fourth guy was Stoll and Quez, and he's just like, I'm not throwing to those guys. So it's like, I got AJ, I got Devontae. Whoever looks better, boom, I'm going with it. And if not, maybe I'm just taking the ball myself. I actually saw that happened to Goddard too many times, in my opinion, where he clearly is looking at Goddard. He's got more space than any other receiver, and he chooses not to throw it. I don't know what is to that. It stuck out, actually, right out of the bat, the first game, it stuck out like the sore thumb. There's like 3 plays I can specifically remember where he just didn't throw it to wide open Goddard. We already talked about not throwing over the middle as much as he should based off how often the receivers are getting open in different parts of the field. Now, he's tremendous throwing outside the numbers and down the field, so I don't blame him for leaning into that strength, but you need a little bit more balance or else. Now, we saw several interceptions where deep half safeties were getting all the way to the sideline and picking it off. Well, if they are not worried about the deep middle, which is the biggest hole in some of these too high schemes, well, now they can start to anticipate the throws to the outside and get over there faster. And the last thing is bailing from clean pockets. He just simply did it. No reason to escape the pocket, no pressure whatsoever, but he probably has some kind of internal clock that goes off. Boom, I'm escaping from the pocket, and he ended up he had the most throwaways in the NFL, I think, something like 35. Well, that's because of bailing from clean pockets. Also they're running route combinations where there's 3 guys running hitches and it's man coverage, and so you're gonna have to throw it away. But yeah, I'd like to see, because when he does step up into a clean pocket, I mean, he's up there with any quarterback in the NFL being able to deliver from those kind of platforms. Anything you think about my weaknesses or ones you would add?
Yeah, so one thing I'll add, I do think he locks onto AJ quite a bit, and it's understandable why. It's very common when you have a receiver as good as AJ. So I do think he locks onto AJ quite a bit, and I think it just leads to missing better opportunities or easier opportunities elsewhere. So I would like to see him spread the ball around a little bit more. Even if I'm not saying you got to pepper your third and fourth receivers with targets more, but getting it to getting it to Devontae and Goddard a little bit more. But I mentioned some of it already, the pocket presence, which I think will help lead to throwing over the middle better. I do think his post-snap diagnosis, I said he was really good with pre-snap diagnosis. Post-snap diagnosis, I don't think it's the best part of his game. If the picture is different from what he was expecting pre-snapped, I think that's when you often see him panic and start to drop his eyes and then not going through the progression and resetting and getting to the rest of the reads. That's not always an issue. He's shown plenty of plays on tape where he has been able to adjust when the defense rotates to a different coverage than they were showing pre-snap. But I do think there's enough instances on tape where you kind of see him panic that I would hope to see with this new offense, with some motions, with being more diverse with their formations and alignments, that it can help give Jalen better reads and better clues pre-snap that lead to better reactions from the defense post-snap. But that's something to be determined. I thought you mentioned something progressing through reads was this is a big thing, and I think it all kind of ties in together with, again, the pocket presence and some of the post snap diagnosis stuff. I think he's more of a first and second read quarterback, and then is looking to scramble. I think part of that, could you say, is the offense? Yeah, sure, but I think a lot of it you could say is this guy has grown up the vast majority of his playing career being able to get away with going through your first and second reads and then scrambling and creating, whether you're running for first downs or you're extending the play to to throw it down the field on a scramble drill, whatever it may be. When you're just a much better athlete than kids in high school and college, even college, you can get away with that stuff more so than in the NFL. And he's still gotten away with it in the NFL. So there is a fine line to balance of letting him use his playmaker abilities or playing on time. There's a play I can think to the Cardinals game. He ends up throwing a touchdown because he extends the play and throws the ball further down the field. But if it's a guy like Kirk Cousins, I expect he would have gone and thrown the ball to his check down because he doesn't have that ability to extend plays like Jalen Hurts does. So for that reason, I think as part of the reason he does go through his first, second reads and then scramble more often than you see from other quarterbacks, is part of that the offense? Yes. Part of it is his playing style too, though. That's his playing style that he's grown up with his whole life. When fight or flight kicks in, a lot of times he's going to resort to what his instincts are. And a lot of times his instincts are to scramble. So that's what I'm going to be looking for with pocket presence. I think all that will help him progress through his reads. And when you add to that, you look at the running back targets throughout the years with Jalen Hurts, they're generally not that high. And that's generally because he's opting to scramble or extend plays more so than get to the check down. And a lot of times targets to running backs come through checkdowns. So I do hope to see, I know a lot of people are projecting Saquon Barkley for a shit ton of receptions this year. I'm not so sure it's going to be a really high number just because of the factor of they have a really good offense around Saquon Barkley. They don't need to funnel the offense through him, especially in the pass game. But also Jalen's not the type of quarterback that he's shown in his career that's really going to go through first, second, third, fourth, get the ball to his check down and his progression. So that's something I hope to see improve because when you think about it, as he gets older, his athleticism is going to dip a little bit. As you get older, you don't recover quite as well. You'd hope to take less hits for the quarterback. So as he ages and extends his playing career, you want him to become a better pocket passer so he doesn't turn into Russell Wilson or turn into Cam Newton, right? Where Russell Wilson hasn't really developed the ability to play on time, but he can still throw a great deep ball and scramble and extend plays. Or Cam Newton just continued to take hits and then it wore his body down. I hope he doesn't become that. I hope he can advance and develop into the type of quarterback that we hope to see him become with like the type of Josh Allen, Mahomes type players. So that's what I got for weaknesses. Did you have anything to add before we get to? I think I talked mostly about what I wanted to talk about with how Kellen Moore is going to use him, and then after that we can get to the Kenny Pickett and Tanner McKee discussion just briefly. But did you have anything else to add?
If he plays on time, I think the defense has very little chance of stopping the Eagles' offense, especially because they're going to have to commit resources to the run game. I mean, Dickerson and Mailata on one side, and then Becton and Johnson on the other side, and they're going to be running a fair bit of like wide zone, I think. That's going to be brutal. I mean, if you don't have the numbers, you have no chances of stopping that for like less than 4 yards. So that just, that's going to make the play action game more potent. I think his legs are going to be better this year, and they have a much better wide receiver 3. So they're just stacking the deck in their favor. And we both agree that Hurts is more than talented enough to make it work with all those, parts around him.
Yep. And so again, I talked mostly about how I think, Jalen's going to be used, differences from last year and going into this year. Again, under center and shotgun, I still think they're going to be using a good amount of their quarterback run game. I think they're going to use more quick game, which is why we'll see him target over the middle more. So that might substitute a little bit for the run game. We might see run game numbers or run pass percentages a little bit down this year. But I think, we've talked about motions, but even more so, I think bunch and stack alignments are going to make life easier for Jalen Hurts. This is something that Kellen Moore thrives in, something that he uses a lot in his offenses, is being able to use bunches and stacks, because a lot of times that forces, like motion, especially fast motion at the snap, can force a defense into a very basic and bland coverage structure behind it. Going into using bunch and stack alignments often forces very only so many responses you can give to stay sound on defense. So you can get a little bit more predictable from a defense when you go into these type of alignments. So I think we'll see that from, I think that's going to help Jalen Hurts. I think this is going to help the receivers not have to deal with as much press or not have to, they get a little bit more space to work at the top of the route instead of having someone in their hip pocket right away. So I think it's going to help the entire offense as a whole using more bunch and stack looks.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's all over the film. I think it'll definitely benefit Devontae and Dotson the most. Dotson can break. We mentioned this in a previous podcast. Dotson can beat the press, but only with quickness. But if the guy gets his hands on him, he's pretty much neutralized. But in a stack, you just can't press. So between that and motion, I think they'll get a lot of free releases for Dotson, and he'll run a lot of like intermediate routes where we think that's where he's the best. Just to put a specific routes on it, like a 12-yard out route and like a 15-yard comeback, he's just really good at attacking the leverage of the corner and getting separation at the top of the stem. He's an enigmatic receiver for me because I watch those plays and I'm like, oh, he's like a shifty gadgets guy who can play underneath, and then he's not. And then you see he has 4.4 at the combine. You're like, oh, he can run deep clear outs. And like he can, but he's not really a bona fide deep threat. All that to say, I think he's effective. And AJ just came out and said this. He's gonna get crappy players manning him up at times, and he's good enough to exploit that. And when it's, when they're playing the Packers week 1, and by all extents and purposes, Hafley's running this true cover 3 where his guys are dropping to spots in the field and reading the quarterback. Now you start to be able to use concepts to get it to AJ and Devontae. It's much easier to attack, vanilla coverage like that. Now, we haven't seen, Hafley coming from Boston College. Can you perfectly predict how his scheme will change? No, but if the preseason's any indication, they were pretty much running single high 90% of the time, so I expect that to continue. Just as a little bit of a preview, we will be doing recaps and previews for each game throughout the season, and we're going to really put a lot of effort in these to make them as thorough as anywhere you'll find on the internet. So I think you guys will be excited to see that. And I've started a lot of my deep dive onto the Packers game. So we're pretty much a week away now. So we'll come out with that soon. And I think you guys will love it.
Okay, so yeah, definitely pay attention to that, to the recaps, the previews, and I'll still be putting out some of the solo episodes as well, where I kind of take a deep dive into real specifics on a certain part of the game. So look out for that this season. But let's finish this up real quickly and jump into the quarterback 2 talk. I think we really have to kind of talk about Pickett and McKee. A lot of the questions right now, and people have been commenting, we said in our last podcast that we think Pickett's going to be the quarterback 2. Some people are asking how can that be when it looked like McKee clearly outplayed him. And especially if you zero in on the second game, McKee looked clearly the better player than Pickett. But I think sometimes we look through things with rose-colored glasses, especially when McKee kind of showed out last year in the preseason. And he's a homegrown drafted kid. We're really excited about him. So we kind of overlook some of the other parts of his game, or maybe look at the parts that we want to look at. When you look at their battle, neither one was really that great outside of McKee in the second game. But Pickett had a higher completion percentage and a higher adjusted completion percentage. So taking out throwaways, drops, batted passes, those kind of events. Pickett had a higher completion and adjusted completion percentage in 2 of the 3 games. He had a higher yards per attempt in 2 of the 3 games. So I know a lot of people are saying Pickett attempted like 2 passes further than 10 yards down the field. Somehow Pickett still had a higher yards per attempt in 2 of the 3 games. McKee had 2 turnover-worthy throws. Pickett had 0. And he had the fumble lost. Pickett had no turnovers. You add into this, Pickett faced 41% pressure rate versus McKee at 26%. McKee had a lot of uh, good, clean pockets to throw from, whereas Pickett didn't, especially in that New England game. Everyone's kind of looking at that and like blaming Kenny Pickett for that. I don't think he looked great under pressure. Part of preseason, why it's important to play in the preseason games, I think in my mind for the quarterback, at least for a couple drives, is because you've been practicing all year with the red shirt and practice. You have kind of forgotten that you can get touched now. You have to navigate the pocket. Those throws that you might have been able to make in practice, well, you kind of have to you have to be a little bit quicker in the game. So I would like for the Eagles had to have Jalen play at least a series or two just to kind of get in there. And remember, hey, I can get hit again at this point in time. So I don't think Pickett looked great in the against pressure in that New England game, but he was also getting there was pressure right away. Uh, the Eagles they're giving a look to their deep roster guys. They moved in their third string offensive line pretty early in that game. And the Eagles were playing the Patriots were playing multiple players on the defensive line that are either starters or going to get significant playing time for them this upcoming year. And you could see the difference between starting caliber players and third string players, and a third string tackle that never even played tackle in his career. And he was getting absolutely destroyed. It's kind of hard to get a judgment on the players on that regard. Pickett is more mobile, so if things break down, he can create plays with his feet. I don't know if anyone remembers a McKee play where he had to scramble, comes up a yard short. Is that a play that Pickett can make? There's also a known with Pickett. He's 14-10 as a starter. If you can get that out of your backup quarterback, you take that all day, every day. We don't know. We've never seen McKee against starting caliber players. Can he provide that level? Did Pickett do a whole lot to get his team to that? No, but I think part of being a backup quarterback is not turning the ball over, like I mentioned with McKee. And Pickett doesn't put the ball in harm's way a lot when he plays. So his turnover-worthy throw percentage was second lowest in 2023. It was eighth lowest in 2022. So as a backup quarterback, you kind of want them to come in, not create negatives for your offense, keep the offense on track, let them go through the run game, quick pass game, screen game, stuff like that. So I think for that reason, they're probably going to roll with Pickett as the quarterback too. And then I'll add one more thing. When you're going through preseason games, it's really, truly hard to get a judge on quarterbacks because the defenses are playing so bland. It's a lot of McKee's best throws, they're accurate throws. He was definitely more accurate than Pickett was. But a lot of it was first read throws. He wasn't having to go through his progressions. It was get the ball, throw it to my spot on the out route, get the ball, throw it to my spot on the fade to Ngata. Those kind of plays. What happens when the defense gets a little bit more complex? When they start shifting and tricking you and giving you different clues. We can't necessarily see that from the preseason games on our end. That's something that the coaches see more so in practice. We're not there to see that stuff, so I can't truly judge on that. But those are things that we don't get to see on our end from fans to not overlook in the evaluation process as well. So, Eric, thoughts on the quarterback 2 battle?
Yeah, to me, it's like McKee has a much better arm, but Pickett gives you a better chance of winning. If you look back at last year, the Steelers with Pickett playing beat the Browns, they beat the Ravens, they beat the Rams, they beat the Packers and the Bengals. So if there's a big benefit to having a fairly mobile, risk-averse quarterback who can, at times, keep the chains moving with mostly non-aesthetic quarterback play. And here's the best part about it. The Eagles have so many weapons and a good offensive line that it would really minimize how much he would be asked to do if he has to come in a certain situation. I don't think it would go off the rails. If he asked to play for extended time, of course, those warts will show up. But if they need just a game here and there and all the offensive guys are healthy, aside from quarterback, I think they can still win in those situations. One of the reasons McKee, what was his draft? 5th round or something?
I think it was 5th round.
Yeah. One of the reasons he dropped was because he was considered to be a statue. And there's reports that he's worked on that extensively to try to become more mobile. Ultimately, you're only going to be able to improve your mobility a certain amount, especially coming from where he was. And, anything's an improvement. We did see a few plays in the preseason where he was able to get out of the pocket. He's still very slow, but better than where he was, which was can't move more than like 5 feet. That's a huge problem. One of the there's a bunch of talented quarterbacks, like good arm talent and stuff that get drafted who are statues, and it's their undoing. That's what makes Matt Stafford so unbelievable. Is he is as close as it comes to a statue in the NFL, but his processing for the most part is really good. I will say, watching his film, every now and again he'll make an absurdly wild throw that you're like, what is he looking at? But for the most part, it's good processing, and the arm talent is unbelievable. I mean, you're talking, top 2 or 3 in the league for sure. So he can make it work. Most guys can't. So I am not that optimistic that McKee would develop into anything meaningful, but it's nice to have him in the quarterback room. At least he has an arm. So, if you did get down to your third quarterback, it would be a better situation than what we saw with San Fran in the playoffs after Purdy got hurt. They pretty much forfeited the game once Johnson came in, and then he even got hurt. It's conceivable to me that the Eagles could still win with McKee in there, but I definitely would not put him ahead of Pickett at this point. Pickett, I think he stinks. His accuracy is really bad. But he does enough not like non-negative things to make it, to make it work. You can stay afloat. He's for example, a guy like Johnny Manziel or Tim Tebow, maybe they're comparable talents to Pickett, but they're way more likely to just completely blow the game for you. So that's kind of why they fizzled out of the NFL. I think Pickett could stay around as a career backup and be serviceable in small sample sizes. So hopefully it doesn't come to that, but I could confidently say our backup situation is probably better than at least half the league without looking at it directly. So I will say though, we did give up a pick swap for it that might have been a decent player in the 90s there, which I don't like it. Unless you're getting someone who's like a true stud backup, I thought it was a little rich. But yeah, Howie was able to recoup a bunch of picks for next year, so I think it all worked out.
Yeah, well, that's the world of backup quarterbacks in the NFL. And there's a lot of expectations for them. For some reason, with fans, whenever preseason comes along, and it always ends up, this guy sucks. Why is he even in the league? Well, that's why you really see the differences and why quarterbacks get paid, how much they get paid, because there is a big difference between who are the best quarterbacks in the league and then who are even the league average quarterbacks. So, having said that, that wraps up all of our position previews. Even though this was a little late, but we're a week away, less than a week. Once this gets put out, less than a week away, we're gonna be in game week. So make sure to let your friends know about the podcast, like, subscribe, spread the word, and until next time, go Birds.